The little girl stood frozen for a moment, her small hands clutched tightly around the straps of her backpack, and her eyes darted nervously from side to side, searching for anyone familiar in the crowd around her. She could feel the warmth of tears sliding down her cheeks, and the fear building up in her chest, as she realized that her mother had disappeared somewhere inside the store and had not come back out. She took a deep shaky breath and looked up at the biker who was standing a few feet away, his leather jacket worn and his helmet tucked under one arm. His eyes softened when he saw her trembling form, and without a word he knelt down to her level. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice calm and steady, but she could not answer. She shook her head frantically and pointed toward the store, her tiny fingers quivering. He glanced quickly toward the glass doors and saw the busy shoppers moving in and out. Oblivious to the panic in the little girl's heart, he reached out a hand toward her, and she hesitated for a moment, then finally took it, gripping it tightly, as if holding onto a lifeline. Together, they began moving toward the entrance of the store, the biker scanning the crowd and looking for anyone who seemed out of place or suspicious. The little girl whispered her mother's name over and over under her breath, and each time the biker encouraged her to keep walking and not to give up hope. As they entered the store, the fluorescent lights flickered slightly overhead and the air smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and fresh bread from the nearby bakery section. The biker kept a firm grip on the girl's hand and guided her past aisles of colorful products and displays that seemed enormous to her small frame. Every step she took made her stomach twist with worry as they approached the checkout area, where a few cashiers glanced up from their registers but did not notice anything unusual. The biker whispered to her to stay close and follow his lead. He asked her to describe the last time she saw her mother, and she told him that she had gone down an aisle to look at some items and promised to be right back, but then she never came out. The biker nodded silently, and his eyes narrowed as he started retracing the mother's steps through the aisles, noting the way some items were slightly out of place or knocked over. He sensed that something had happened here, and the feeling in his chest tightened. He could feel the tension rising, and he knew that they had to act quickly. He asked the little girl to stay behind a rack of cereal boxes where he could still see her, and instructed her to be very quiet. He moved cautiously through the store, observing the other shoppers, some of whom seemed to be paying no attention at all, while others glanced nervously at the pair as if they could sense the anxiety in the air. He noticed a narrow hallway behind the customer service desk that led to the back storage area, and a faint sound of movement caught his attention. His instincts told him to investigate, and he carefully made his way down the hallway, checking each door and corner as he went. The little girl pressed herself against the wall, peeking around the end of the cereal aisle, her heart pounding as she waited for any sign of her mother. She could hear the distant sound of voices that did not belong to the regular staff, and a cold shiver ran down her spine. The biker paused and listened intently, trying to determine whether the sounds were dangerous or simply someone moving boxes or preparing shipments. He crept closer to a slightly ajar door at the end of the hallway and heard a faint whimper that made his chest tighten. He knew immediately that it could be her mother, and he called out softly to reassure whoever was inside that help was coming. The little girl heard the voice and felt a flicker of hope. She stepped out cautiously, following the biker a few steps behind, feeling both fear and courage mingling inside her. Her small feet barely made a sound on the tile floor, and she clutched her backpack straps tighter as they approached the door. The biker motioned for her to stay back as he gently pushed it open and peered inside. The room was dimly lit and filled with stacked boxes and crates. The sound of movement came from the far corner, and as his eyes adjusted, he saw Beef, the mother, crouched behind a pile of cardboard, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. The biker spoke calmly, letting her know that they were here to help, and the mother slowly came out from her hiding place, her voice trembling as she tried to reassure her daughter, who had finally appeared at the door. She ran toward her little girl and embraced her tightly, holding her close as if never wanting to let go. The little girl clung to her mother, crying tears of relief, while the biker watched silently, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and unease, knowing that the danger might not be completely over. Yet he scanned the room again, noticing that some of the boxes had been disturbed, and there were signs that someone had been here recently. He realized that the mother had likely encountered trouble, and the people responsible might still be nearby. His mind raced, trying to figure out the safest way to get both of them out of the store without alerting anyone who might pose a threat. He gestured for the mother to take her daughter's hand and follow him slowly back through the hallway and toward the front of the store. He kept his senses sharp, listening for any unusual sounds and watching the movement of other shoppers who now seemed to glance more attentively at the three of them. Little girl felt the warmth and protection of her mother beside her and the strong presence of the biker ahead, and for a moment she felt a tiny spark of courage in the midst of her fear. Each step toward the front exit was tense and heavy with the knowledge that they might encounter the people who had caused this chaos, but she clung to her mother's hand and followed without hesitation. The biker led them carefully, weaving through the aisles and past the cash registers, keeping an eye out for anything suspicious and making sure that everyone stayed calm and unaware of the unfolding situation. He felt a growing sense of urgency as he knew that getting outside to safety was the only way to fully resolve the moment of terror that had gripped the little girl and her mother. Finally, they neared the automatic doors that led to the parking lot, and the little girl felt the cool breeze from outside brushing against her face for the first time in what felt like hours. Her heart still raced, but the fear began to mix with relief and anticipation as they stepped into the open air. The biker scanned the lot quickly, noticing people walking to and tent from their cars and a few vehicles parked at odd angles as if someone had left in a hurry. He guided the mother and daughter toward a safe spot near his motorcycle and kept a careful eye on their surroundings, making sure that no one suspicious approached them. He crouched slightly to the little girl's level and reassured her that she had been very brave, and that they would make sure her mother was safe and that the people who caused the trouble would be dealt with soon. The little girl nodded, clinging to both her mother and the biker as the sunlight fell on their faces, and for a moment the tension eased, though a faint shadow of worry remained in the air. Her mind raced with questions about what had happened inside the store and why her mother had been taken or trapped, but she also felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude toward the biker who had appeared seemingly out of nowhere to guide them to safety. The mother looked at the biker with tearful eyes and whispered a quiet "thank you," knowing that without him they might still be trapped in fear and uncertainty. And for the first time since the ordeal began, they allowed themselves a moment of calm together, standing in the parking lot surrounded by the ordinary world that now felt both safe and fragile. The biker remained alert, scanning the cars and people around them and thinking about the next steps to ensure that the danger was fully addressed. He felt the tension in his shoulders begin to ease slightly as he realized that the immediate threat to the little girl and her mother had been mitigated. But he knew that the story was not completely over, that there were questions to be answered, and perhaps more danger lurking unseen in the shadows. He stayed close by, ready to protect them until the authorities arrived, and the mother and daughter finally felt that they could breathe normally again. Their hands still tightly clasped together, they moved slowly toward the relative safety of the sidewalk and the bustling street beyond, and the little girl glanced back at the biker, feeling a spark of trust and awe for the stranger who had become their unexpected guardian. The biker led the mother and little girl to a safer corner of the parking lot, his eyes constantly scanning for any unusual movement or lingering threats. The mother clutched her daughter tightly, whispering reassurances that everything would be all right, while the little girl held on to her mother as if letting go would mean losing her forever. The sun reflected off the cars and cast long shadows across the asphalt, and the tension in the air was thick with unspoken questions about what had happened. Inside the store, the biker crouched slightly to speak to the mother, quietly telling her to remain calm and not to make sudden movements. He motioned toward a nearby security guard, who was walking toward the store seemingly unaware of the unfolding situation, and explained softly what had happened and that they needed help immediately. Little girl listened intently, her eyes wide with curiosity and lingering fear as she tried to understand the seriousness of the situation. The mother nodded and signaled her agreement, while the biker stepped slightly forward to intercept the approaching guard, directing him toward the back storage area where the mother had been trapped. The guard followed carefully, and the biker kept one eye on the surroundings, knowing that the people responsible might still be nearby, hiding or watching from a distance. He instructed the mother to stay with him and the little girl and not to approach anyone else until he gave the signal. The little girl felt the strength and protection radiating from the biker, and for the first time since her mother had disappeared, she felt a small spark of courage as the guard disappeared. Toward the back, the biker noticed a suspicious vehicle parked a few rows away, its engine running and the driver looking nervously around as if waiting for something. He felt a chill run down his spine, realizing that the danger might not be over yet. The mother whispered a question about who would do such a thing, and he shook his head, indicating that he did not know, but reassured her that they would make sure she and her daughter were safe. He scanned the lot and saw a few bystanders watching the scene curiously, and he positioned himself between them and the mother and little girl, making sure no one could approach unexpectedly. Suddenly, a figure emerged from between two cars, moving quickly toward the store, and the biker tensed, ready to confront whoever it was, but then he recognized it as one of the store employees carrying a box of supplies. His shoulders relaxed slightly, but he stayed alert. The little girl clutched her mother's hand tightly, and the mother looked at the biker with tearful gratitude, whispering again that she could not believe he had appeared at the right moment. The biker nodded silently and kept his eyes on the parking lot, scanning every shadow and movement, knowing that while the immediate danger had passed, the story was far from over. After several tense minutes, the security guard returned, and the biker guided him through the details, leading him toward the storage area while keeping the mother and little girl at a safe distance. The mother held her daughter close, whispering encouragement, and the little girl finally began to calm down, her tears slowing as the realization of safety began to sink in. The biker stayed vigilant, and once the authorities arrived, he explained everything to them from the moment he had seen the little girl running to the discovery of her trapped mother. The officers nodded and began taking statements, and the mother held her daughter tightly, whispering that they would be okay. Now the little girl looked up at the biker, her eyes wide with awe and gratitude, and for a moment there was a quiet understanding between them that he had been their guardian in a moment of fear and uncertainty. The sun continued to shine down on the parking lot, and slowly the tension began to lift, leaving behind a fragile sense of relief and the knowledge that a single act of courage and kindness had changed everything for the little girl and her mother.